Today, and now the pain begins. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Welcome to this post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. Today I want to do two things. Firstly, pick up some of the thematics from the commentary relating to the Reserve Bank's recent interest rate moves and the fallout. And then later I'm going to issue a second post focusing more specifically on individual households and the tactics that can be used in the current environment to try and ease the pain a little. Frankly, we've got to take control ourselves because the regulators and the Reserve Bank and the government really can't do much at the moment. It's very much down to what we do as individuals. But let's start first with this from the AFR today. The former governor, Ian Macfarlane, says the property market is the big hurdle for the central bank as it raises rates, but it cannot be hostage to home buyers. And it's a $10 trillion question which is facing the Australian economy after the Reserve Bank's rate rise. How much pain is the central bank prepared to accept in the country's highly indebted housing market to get inflation back under control? Ian Macfarlane, the former RBA governor, who was responsible for introducing Australia's inflation target in 1996, said that the central bank will need to walk a very fine line, but argues it cannot give up the fight because of the potential damage that higher rates will do to those who have bought homes in the past 12 months. You can't allow the marginal mortgage borrower to determine the central bank's ability to change interest rates, he told the AFR during an interview at the Morgan Stanley Australia Summit on Wednesday. They can't be really held hostage by the most recent of those borrowers. It was always the case whenever the central bank raised rates and the mortgage rate went up, whoever were the most recent borrowers always found themselves in a position where their servicing costs are higher than their original agreement. That doesn't mean that the Reserve Bank can ignore the developments in the housing market. Far from it. It just means that there isn't a mechanical, rigid limit to what they can do because of the marginal mortgage borrower. Macfarlane, who described the RBA's 50 basis point increase on Tuesday as the right decision, said central banks will be feeling their way through the battle against inflation. Not only is the relationship between interest rates and inflation far less robust than many academic economists believe, but the US Federal Reserve and the RBA are also starting their fight against inflation from an extraordinary point following almost 15 years of unprecedented expansion of monetary policy. But Macfarlane sees hurdles that may prevent the Fed and the RBA raising rates as far as needed to get inflation under control. In the US, the financial market is so large and so complex that a crisis forces the Fed to reverse course, much like 2019, when a crisis in money markets led it to abandon its rate rising cycle and reinstated quantitative easing. In Australia, the challenge is the housing sector, which is so central to household wealth. You actually have to affect the level of activity in the economy, Macfarlane said, and housing is a conduit for that because when interest rates go up, these people continue to service their mortgages and cut back on other forms of expenditure and consumption. He sees two potential scenarios playing out. The RBA could be forced to call off raising rates before they reach the level that is necessary to bring inflation down. Alternatively, the RBA might find that even if interest rates don't go up as far as expected, the impact on housing consumption, construction, and other areas might be enough to sufficiently reduce economic activity. It's an open question, he says, but Macfarlane does provide one ray of hope for housing. His experience tells him that households will make many sacrifices before they default on their mortgage. When you look at the incidence of mortgage delinquencies and see what they're related to, they're not really related to interest rates at all. They're related to unemployment. If people lose their job, then they can't pay the mortgage. But if interest rates go up, they tighten their belts and they continue to pay their mortgages. So that's the reassuring part, well, at least not necessarily for households, though, I'd add. And it was standing room only for Macfarlane's session, which perhaps underscores the battle investors and companies face in interpreting the rapidly changing picture around inflation and interest rates. But Richard Wagner, chief executive of Morgan Stanley's Australian business, said confidence levels inside Australians' boardrooms remain strong, no small part due to the state of the broader economy. The Australian consumer is in good shape, the resources sector is performing well, the banks are in rude health, and the tech wreck that has hit the US hasn't occurred in Australia, he said. So, Australia looks like an ideal safe haven, particularly in the Asia-Pacific region. And Wagner said deal-making activity remained robust, although companies are still taking longer to execute. I still think Australia's boards are very focused on growth. I don't think that goes away. Well, we will see. Just remember this. The big four banks have all announced that they've increased home loan variable interest rates by 0.5% per annum for new and existing customers. Following the Reserve Bank of Australia's decision to increase the cash rate by its greatest amount in over 20 years, Westpac became the first Big Four bank to announce that it will be following suit and increasing variable rates by 50 basis points. The changes will take effect from the 21st of June. It said it also introduced a term deposit of 2.25% per annum for 12 months to support customers with their savings. Now that will be available from Thursday the 9th. Other deposit and interest rates remain under review at this time, Westpac said. Westpac Consumers and Business Banking Chief Executive Chris de Bruin commented, "We know a change in interest rates affects every budget differently. Our customers have managed their finances carefully during the pandemic, with many putting more funds aside in their savings and offset accounts. This means the majority of our customers are ahead on mortgage repayments and have a buffer available to help them manage an interest rate increase." Mr. De Bruin added that customers could utilise the bank's range of tools, such as its online repayment calculator, to help them manage their home loan repayments and see how adjusting their loan amount, term or interest rate will impact them or help to pay off the loans sooner. The bank highlighted that planning ahead, paying loans more frequently and maximising offset accounts could help variable rate customers manage repayments. And he suggested that any customers who need some extra help, who are in financial difficulty, should contact the bank's customer assist for personalised support as soon as possible to determine a solution. June's rate hike is expected to be one of several coming down the tracks this year. Westpac economists, as well as those at CBA, are now forecasting that the RBA will hike official rates to 1.35% when they next meet on the 5th of July 2022. And it suggests that the cash rate is then likely to move in 25 basis point increments, with a pause as the RBA moves above neutral to a peak in February 2023 of 235 basis points. Economist Bill Evans commented that the key observation is that the RBA governor's statement was inflation is higher than earlier expected. Global factors account for much of the increase, but domestic factors are playing a role too, with capacity constraints in some sectors and the tight labour market contributing to upward pressure on prices. This statement clearly signals that the bank now recognises it has a significant challenge to contain inflation, and today's decision points to it now being prepared to act decisively. For that reason, we expect that the next move in July will also be 50 basis points. A slowdown in the pace of hikes in August can be expected, but a response will still be necessary to the likely upside surprise on inflation for the June quarter, with a further 25 basis points move required. With the cash rate having reached 160 basis points by August, it will be prudent for the bank to pause. Our analysis of the leverage in household balance sheets points to a cash rate of around 160 basis points being in the neighbourhood of neutral. Better to pause at that point to assess the impact on household consumption, house prices, the labour market, consumer and business confidence, and the response of wages growth to these inflation pressures. And they went on to say, we expect further increases of 25 basis points be required in November and December in response to another disturbing inflation print for the September quarter. 2022 would end with a cash rate of 2.1%, a policy stance that we would assess as in the contractory zone. Similarly, CBA, ANZ and NAB all announced on Wednesday the 8th that they will be passing on the full increase to variable rate borrowers from next Friday the 17th of June. In this decision, ANZ said it considered various factors including the change in the official cash rate, along with the impact on customers, business performance and competition. The bank estimated that the change will increase monthly repayments by $115 on an average home loan of $450,000 for an owner-occupier paying principal and interest. ANZ's Group Executive Australia Retail, Miley Carnegie, said, "We know rate changes affect customers differently and some may be looking for support as they reorganise their household budgets, particularly if they haven't experienced many rate increases before. ANZ is here to help, and for customers seeking more information about how to manage their finances, we have a number of ways to support them, including a free home loan check-in that can help them reorganise their loan so it continues to meet their needs. Many of our customers remain in good financial condition to manage rate rises, with about 70% ahead on repayments. A large number of them have built up buffers after not changing their repayments when rates reduced over several years." NN said it's also reviewing its current savings rates, but would offer a new rate for its 11-month advanced notice term deposit of 2.25% from Monday the 13th of June to help customers with their savings goals. The bank's economists have said they believe the RBA will raise rates by 25 basis points in July, 50 basis points in August, with 2 more increases after that. Meanwhile, CBA's new standard variable reference rate will therefore be, for owner-occupied principal interest rate variable loans, they'll go up by 0.5% to 5.3% per annum. Investor principal and standard variable interest rate loans will go up by 0.5% to 5.88% per annum, and unoccupied interest-only standard variable rate loans will increase by 0.5% to 5.79% per annum, while investor interest-only standard variable rate loans will also go up by 0.5% to 6.14% per annum. CBA's Group Executive Retail Banking Angus Sullivan said, "We are here to support Australian households who may be concerned about their home loan repayments. We encourage customers to contact us to discuss the options available to them, including ensuring offset accounts are set up and linked to their eligible home or investment loan." And the bank said it would also increase the bonus interest rate for selected savings products by the same amount from next Friday, the 17th of June. The Gold Saver bonus interest rate will increase to 0.75% per annum, while the Youth Saver bonus interest rate will increase to 0.95% per annum, and the bank will also be extending the availability of its 18-month term deposit special offer of 2.25%. Mr. Sullivan said it's been a challenging time for many savers who've experienced a long period of record low interest rates. We hope these changes provide some much needed support for our customers looking to save. And speaking on behalf of NAB, the bank's Group Executive Personal Banking, Rachel Slade, said that the 50 basis point increase would see NAB owner-occupied customers paying principal interest on a 30-year $400,000 choice package by $116 a month on their repayments. Our decision today reflects the domestic and global environment, including changes to official cash rates, Ms. Slade said. We have 930,000 home loan customers and we are here to support them as interest rates rise. The cost of living is also increasing, and our message to any of our customers who may be concerned is that we are here to help. And NAB is also offering a special 12-month term deposit interest rate of 2.25% to support customers with their savings, with Ms. Slade noting that historic low interest rates have been difficult for them. Other savings and deposit interest rates continue to be under review. And some non-major lenders have also begun lifting rates. MyState Bank revealed it would increase its variable rate by 50 basis points effective Monday the 20th of June for both new and existing customers. We encourage our customers to prepare for more interest rate rises in the months to come. Looking at your household budget now will help you manage any future changes. As a responsible lender, MyState strictly assesses customers' repayment capacity as part of our application, which includes a serviceability buffer above current interest rates. However, the lender also announced that it would be passing the rate hike on to bonus saver account holders too, effective from next Wednesday, the 15th of June. This increase is to be applied to accounts for new and existing customers, taking the maximum monthly interest paid to 1.6% once eligibility requirements have been met. And MyState is also increasing interest paid on term deposit accounts by up to 1.85%, taking the new headline rate to 3% for a 24-month term. And of course, there are consequences of all this. Sydney and Melbourne home prices could fall by 20% as the Reserve Bank of Australia lifted the interest rates by 75 basis points in the past 5 weeks, and they move aggressively to stifle demand and tame inflation. Cameron Cusher, Executive Manager for Economic Research at REA Group, said the RBA is moving quickly, more quickly in fact than anticipated, and predicted national dwelling prices will fall by 10 to 15% and higher in Sydney and Melbourne. Mr. Kusher said REA Group originally expected the cash rate, now at 0.85% after Tuesday's 50 basis point hike, to reach a peak of 1.75% in mid-2023, but now believes it will hit 2% by the end of this year. From our perspective, interest rates are going to end up higher than we thought they would, and they're going to do so a lot quicker, he said. Given the speed at which interest rates are going to rise, we expect property prices to fall by 10 to 15% and possibly even more than that. Price falls in Sydney and Melbourne could get up to 20%, maybe even a little bit more than that, depending on how quickly interest rates rise. Mr. Kusher said the top and bottom ends of the Melbourne and Sydney markets were most at risk. At the top end, you tend to have a more finite supply of buyers, particularly when the market is getting tougher, he said. I think the outer areas of the cities where a lot of first home buyers have jumped in over the past couple of years because of all the incentives in play and the low interest rates are most susceptible to larger falls. Paul Bloxham, Chief Economist ANZ at HSBC, said the RBA has moved to inflation-fighting mode and predicted the cash rate will now reach 2.1% early in 2023. The shift in tone suggests the RBA is likely to front-load some more rate hikes, Mr. Bloxham said. I would say 200 basis points of hikes is likely to push national house prices down by 12 to 15% over a 2-year period. We've got more of a decline happening in Sydney and Melbourne than the rest of the cities and regions. Mr. Bloxham said the smaller cities and some regions could hold up better. With more people able to work from anywhere, there's increased demand for being in places outside Sydney and Melbourne. However, Eliza Owen, head of Australian research for CoreLogic, said there are already signs that larger regional cities such as Newcastle and Geelong are beginning to falter after steep property price rises over the past 2 years. And then the REIA president, Hayden Groves, highlighted that housing affordability has declined over the March quarter of 2022, with the proportion of income required to meet home loan repayments increasing to 37.3%. That's an increase of 0.2 percentage points. Housing affordability improved in New South Wales and the Northern Territory, remained stable in the ACT, but declined in all other states. Rental affordability declined more than housing affordability, with the proportion of income required to meet median rents increasing by 0.5 percentage points to 23.5%. Rental affordability declined in all states and territories except the Northern Territory, he said. Tasmania remains the most unaffordable state to rent, with income to rent needed sitting at a huge 30.8%. Mr. Grove said the number of first home buyers decreased to 29,093, a drop of 22.5% during the quarter and a fall of 33.9% over the past 12 months. First home buyers are now making up 31.6% of owner-occupied dwelling commitments, a decrease of 2.7 percentage points over the quarter and 8.7 percentage points over the year. And the number of first home buyers fell over the March quarter in all states and territories. Declines range from 10.5% in Western Australia to 40.2% in the Northern Territory, he said. Mr. Grove said that the RBA's announcement of further interest rate hikes is likely to see further declines in housing affordability, but added that they remain historically low and will hopefully help slow rising inflation. And according to Mr. Groves, the average home loan size for first home buyers increased to $475,544. That was a rise of 0.9% over the quarter and an increase of 11.7% over the past 12 months. The average loan size for first home buyers increased in all states and territories, ranging from 0.1% in New South Wales to a whopping 9.8% in Tasmania. And the total number of owner-occupied dwelling loans decreased 91,922, a decrease of 16.1% over the March quarter and a fall of 15.9% over the past 12 months. And the total number of loans for owner-occupied dwellings decreased in all states and territories over the March quarter. Decreases range from 8.2% in Western Australia to 21.3% in New South Wales. Over the March quarter, the average loan rose to $603,395. That's an increase of 2.1% over the quarter and an increase of 19.2% over the past 12 months. That's the largest annual increase since the current ABS series began in 2002. And over the quarter, the average loan size grew in all states and territories except the Northern Territory, which had a marginal decline of 1.1%. Increases range from 1% in the ACT to 6.1% in South Australia. And over the past 12 months, the average loan size increased in all states and territories, with New South Wales recording the highest annual growth of 21.6%. And Mr. Groves concluded, with the federal election of 2022 now behind us, it's time to get to work on the fundamentals of housing supply and affordability for Australia's renters, first-home buyers and home owners. And finally, back to the RBA, because the RBA's failings are legion. According to an AFR article, it needs a truly independent review. The RBA did not foresee the surge in inflation. It would be naive to believe they can now forecast. And in fact, last year they warned that the Reserve Bank had lost its way. It had vacated the classic traditional role of a central bank to metaphorically remove the punch bowl as the party was getting going. Instead, it was adopting radical policies to further fuel growth in activity and credit, prolonging the asset price booms, apparently to create more jobs and to reduce unemployment. But we're now living with the consequences of this flawed approach. And the RBA's credibility is in tatters. So much for cash rates not rising until at least 2024. So much for its commitment to hold medium-term bond rates at 0.1%. So much for its forecast that inflation will remain below 3%. In hindsight, the warning bells were ringing loudly in late 2020. Broad money supply then was growing at an annual rate of almost 13% after the RBA had resumed money financing for budget deficits, a practice that had been abandoned more than 30 years earlier because it was so inflationary. This money was pouring into the economy through the financial system, producing all sorts of consequences we are yet to fully understand, but will likely soon begin to. Incredibly, there was barely a murmur of commentary about this rapid growth in money supply. 30 years ago, there would have been mayhem in financial markets if the RBA had ticked off a rate of monetary growth more than double the rate of nominal GDP. Maybe our policymakers came to believe that inflation was indeed dead and buried and was immune to expansionary fiscal and monetary policies. Indeed, a new school of thought had developed, which argued that the RBA was in fact doing too little to stimulate the economy and should have been doing a lot more with its new set of monetary tools. Ipso facto, it was argued that the undershooting of inflation targets in previous years was proof that monetary policy had been too tight and should have been looser. The proponents of monetary theory, as it has become known, were now arguing that with the risks of inflation gone, we could stimulate our economy almost at will. The monetary policy free lunch was in effect here. You may have noticed that we don't hear much about modern monetary theory lately. Just like technology companies a little while ago that could get valued on ridiculous multiples of sales or revenues rather than profits, it was fashionable to see MMT as the new way to run monetary policy until it wasn't. Inflation has roared back into the global and Australian economies, and central banks everywhere have been left stunned by its return. Their forecasts of continued low inflation are in tatters. They completely fail to forecast what was actually happening. To be sure, there have been shocks from both the impact of the pandemic and the Ukraine-Russian war, but ultimately we are learning once again that inflation is nearly always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. Ultra-loose monetary policy should now be packed into a box and labelled never to be tried again. The upcoming review of the RBA has many questions to answer. Top of mind, why was the forecasting of inflation so poor? Why did our central bank have such little regard for history? Why did our central bank become so infatuated with modern monetary thinking and techniques? Why was the board so passive in not challenging management? Why was medium-term guidance provided in a highly uncertain world? Hopefully the review will be able to look at these questions and more, led by a totally independent figure, free to challenge all the current norms and conventions. But meanwhile, we're going to learn again that once the inflation genie is out of the bottle, it's very hard to put it back. Bankers are forecasting that only modest rises in the cash rate will be necessary, more to protect the credit quality of the loan portfolios than because they have any great insight into how to lower inflation from over 6% back to 2 to 3%. It stands to reason that as our policymakers fail to forecast this surge in inflation, it would be naive to believe they can now accurately forecast and manage how and when it will fall down without a serious impact on the underlying economy. The best advice is to fasten your seatbelts and hope the government and its key advisors are now up for the serious challenges ahead. Well said on that. And as I've been saying for some time, the debt bomb is now looking as though it will be hard to diffuse as interest rates rise, and there are more consequences ahead. Anyway, in my second post today, I'll talk about what individual householders can do, because frankly, we can't rely on them upstairs doing the right thing in the right time frame. We are on our own. Now, if you're buying your home in Sydney's contentious market, you don't need to stand alone. This is the time you need to have Edwin Almeida from Ribbon Property Consultants standing alongside you. Buying a property is both challenging and adversarial. The vendor has a professional on their side. Emotions run high, price discovery and price transparency are hard to find, and then there's the wasted time and financial investments that you make. Edwin understands your needs, so why not engage a licensed professional to stand alongside you? With RPC, you know you have experience, knowledge, and master negotiators looking after your best interests. So shoot Ribbon an email at info@ribbonproperty.com.au, and if you use the promo code DFAWTW/Martin, you can get a 10% discount offer. I'm Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Many thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.